It started as a casual conversation between friends on a lazy Saturday afternoon. We were hanging out at Dave's place, tossing around ideas for something fun to do. That's when Chris mentioned the old military bunker on the outskirts of town. "I heard it's been abandoned for decades," he said, his eyes gleaming with excitement. "No one's supposed to go near it, but I bet it's full of cool stuff." The idea of exploring an abandoned bunker immediately piqued our interest. It sounded like the perfect adventure. After some debate, we grabbed our backpacks, loaded them with flashlights, snacks, and a few other essentials, and set out on our impromptu expedition. The bunker was located deep in the woods, a good hour's hike from the nearest road. As we trudged through the dense forest, the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows through the trees. The air was crisp, and the scent of pine hung heavy around us. Finally, we reached a rusty, overgrown fence that marked the perimeter of the old military site. The gate hung ajar, its padlock long since broken. We squeezed through and followed a narrow path that led us to the entrance of the bunker, a massive reinforced door set into a hillside. "Well, here goes nothing," Dave said, giving the door a tentative push. To our surprise, it creaked open, revealing a dark tunnel that seemed to stretch endlessly into the earth. We clicked on our flashlights and stepped inside, our footsteps echoing off the concrete walls. The air was damp and musty, and the temperature dropped noticeably as we ventured further. Graffiti covered the walls, a testament to previous explorers who had dared to enter before us. After a few minutes of walking, we reached a junction with several branching corridors. The place was like a maze, and it was easy to see how someone could get lost down here. We chose a corridor at random and continued our exploration. "Check this out," Chris said, shining his flashlight on a rusted sign that read, "Control Room." Intrigued, we followed the corridor to a large steel door. With some effort, we managed to pry it open and step inside. The control room was a fascinating relic of the past. Old consoles lined the walls, covered in dust and cobwebs. Faded maps and charts were pinned to corkboards, and a few swivel chairs lay toppled on the floor. It was like stepping into a time capsule from another era. We spread out, each of us examining different parts of the room. I found a set of old logbooks, their pages yellowed and brittle. As I flipped through them, I tried to imagine what life must have been like for the soldiers stationed here. "Guys, look at this!" Dave called out. He had found a trap door hidden beneath a pile of debris in the corner of the room. It was small and looked like it hadn't been opened in years. Curiosity got the better of us, and we decided to see where it led. After a bit of struggling, we managed to lift the heavy door, revealing a narrow ladder descending into darkness. One by one, we climbed down, our flashlights illuminating the way. We found ourselves in a small, dimly lit chamber. The walls were lined with old filing cabinets and shelves filled with dusty binders and documents. In the center of the room stood a large metal table with an array of strange equipment on it. This must have been some kind of secret research lab, Chris speculated, examining a set of tools that looked like they belonged in a science fiction movie. As we explored the chamber, I noticed something odd about one of the walls. It had a faint outline, as if there was a hidden door or panel. I called the others over, and together we searched for a way to open it. Chris found a small, concealed lever near the floor. When he pulled it, the wall panel slid open with a soft hiss, revealing another passageway. This one was different from the rest of the bunker, cleaner, more modern. We hesitated, a sense of unease settling over us. "Should we go in?" Dave asked, his voice uncertain. "Only one way to find out," I replied, trying to sound braver than I felt. We stepped into the passageway, our flashlights casting long beams of light ahead of us. The corridor was eerily silent, and the air felt different, staler somehow. As we walked, we noticed the walls were lined with strange cylindrical pods, each one large enough to hold a person. "What the hell is this place?" Chris muttered, shining his light on one of the pods. It was covered in dust, but through the grime, we could see something inside, something human-shaped. A sudden noise echoed down the corridor, making us all jump. It sounded like a distant clatter, as if something had fallen or been knocked over. "We need to get out of here," I said, my voice trembling. The sense of adventure had been replaced by a growing fear. We turned to leave, but the corridor behind us was now shrouded in darkness. Our flashlights flickered, and the air grew colder. Panic set in as we realized we were no longer alone. Shadows moved at the edge of our vision, and the sound of footsteps echoed around us. "Run!" Dave shouted, and we bolted back the way we came, our breaths coming in ragged gasps. The shadows seemed to follow us, closing in with every step. We reached the ladder and scrambled up, one after the other. As I climbed, I glanced down and saw a dark figure standing at the bottom, watching us with eyes that glowed faintly in the dim light. We raced through the control room and down the corridor, our only thought to escape the bunker. The sense of dread grew stronger with every step, as if the very walls were closing in on us. Finally, we burst through the entrance and into the cold night air, collapsing on the ground outside, gasping for breath. We looked back at the bunker, its dark entrance seeming to stare back at us, daring us to return. None of us spoke as we made our way back through the woods, each lost in our own thoughts. The adventure we had sought had turned into a nightmare, and we were grateful to have escaped with our lives. We never spoke of the bunker again, but the memory of that night haunted us. The shadows we had encountered, the strange pods, and the sense of being watched. Those images stayed with us, a reminder of the darkness that lurked beneath the surface of our seemingly ordinary town. The alarm blared, jolting me awake at 6:30 a.m. I groaned, rubbing my eyes, and reached to turn it off. Another Monday. I stumbled out of bed, feeling the weight of the week already pressing down on me. The smell of freshly brewed coffee drifted from the kitchen, a small comfort in my otherwise mundane routine. After showering and dressing, I grabbed my keys and headed out the door. The chill of the autumn morning nipped at my skin as I walked to the bus stop. The same faces greeted me: the elderly man with his newspaper, the teenage girl with her headphones, and the exhausted mother with her young son. Everything felt painfully ordinary. The day at the office dragged on. Meetings, emails, and the constant hum of the fluorescent lights above. By the time 5 p.m. rolled around, I was more than ready to head home. I took the same bus, walked the same path, and entered the same apartment. That night, as I lay in bed, an unsettling feeling crept over me. It was a vague sense of déjà vu, but I shrugged it off, attributing it to the monotony of my life. Little did I know, it was just the beginning. The next morning, the alarm blared at 6:30 a.m. I groaned and reached to turn it off. It felt like an exact replay of the previous day. The same groggy stumble to the bathroom, the same coffee aroma, the same faces at the bus stop. My unease grew, but I convinced myself it was just my imagination. The day unfolded exactly as before. The same meetings, the same emails, the same exhausted trudge home. That night, the sense of déjà vu was even stronger, but exhaustion pulled me into sleep. When the alarm blared at 6:30 a.m. again, panic set in. Everything was repeating with eerie precision. I went through the motions, trying to break the routine, taking a different route to work, eating lunch at a different time, but nothing changed the outcome. Each day reset, trapping me in a relentless cycle. Desperation clawed at me. I tried staying awake all night, hoping to break the loop, but exhaustion always overcame me. I reached out to friends and family, pleading for help, but they repeated the same conversations, oblivious to my plight. Days turned into weeks, and my sanity frayed. I began to notice subtle differences, small, almost imperceptible changes. A misplaced book, a different tie on a coworker. I clung to these anomalies, hoping they held the key to my escape. One day, as I wandered the city in a daze, I noticed a small antique shop I had never seen before. Drawn by a strange compulsion, I entered. The shop was dimly lit, filled with an assortment of curiosities. An old man stood behind the counter, his eyes piercing and knowing. "You seem lost," he said, his voice echoing in the stillness. I poured out my story, desperation coloring my words. The old man listened intently, then nodded slowly. "You are caught in a time loop," he said, "a rare and cruel fate. There is a way to break it, but it requires a great sacrifice." I leaned forward, my heart pounding. "What do I need to do?" He handed me a small, ornate box. "Inside this box is the essence of your day. To break the loop, you must confront your deepest fear and conquer it before the day resets." I opened the box and found a mirror inside. My own reflection stared back at me, tired and haunted. The old man's words echoed in my mind as I left the shop. That night I prepared myself. As the clock ticked towards midnight, I sat in front of the mirror, confronting the reflection of my fears, the fear of a wasted life, of loneliness, of never escaping this hellish cycle. As the final seconds of the day slipped away, I felt a shift. The air around me grew heavy, and the room darkened. A shadowy figure emerged from the mirror, embodying my deepest fears. I stood my ground, heart racing, and faced it. "I will not let you control me," I whispered, more to myself than to the figure. "I choose to live, to fight, to break free." The figure lunged, but I held firm. A blinding light enveloped the room, and the shadowy figure disintegrated. The room returned to normal, and I collapsed, exhausted but victorious. The next morning, the alarm blared at 6:30 a.m. I reached to turn it off, expecting the same dread, but something was different. The air felt lighter, the day brighter. I had broken the loop. Life resumed its normal flow, but I was forever changed. The experience left me with a newfound appreciation for time and the choices I made each day. No longer would I take the ordinary for granted. I had faced my fears and emerged stronger, ready to live each day to its fullest, free from the chains of repetition. It was an unremarkable Tuesday when it all began. I was running late for work as usual, and the hurried morning routine was no different from any other day. After grabbing a quick breakfast, I dashed out the door, my mind already on the day's tasks. The walk to the subway was uneventful, the same familiar faces bustling about. I pushed through the turnstile and descended the stairs, feeling the rush of air as the train approached. I squeezed into a crowded car and found a spot near the door. As the train rattled through the tunnels, I felt a strange sense of unease, a tingling in the back of my mind. When I emerged from the station and walked to my office building, that odd feeling persisted. I dismissed it as the result of a bad night's sleep and pushed through the revolving doors, greeting the security guard as I always did. The elevator ride to the 23rd floor was crowded, and I stared blankly at my reflection in the polished metal doors, feeling the weight of the day ahead. As I settled into my desk and powered up my computer, a wave of déjà vu hit me, stronger than I had ever felt before. The office looked the same, but something felt off. My coworker, Sarah, walked over with her usual morning greeting, but her words sounded eerily familiar, as if I had heard them in a dream. I shook it off and focused on my work. The day passed in a blur of emails and meetings. By lunchtime, the feeling of déjà vu had grown stronger. The conversations, the tasks, even the mistakes I made seemed to echo something I couldn't quite grasp. I mentioned it to Sarah, but she just laughed it off, calling it a case of the Mondays, even though it was Tuesday. By the time I left the office, the feeling had morphed into full-blown anxiety. I walked back to the subway, my steps quickening. I needed to get home and shake off this weirdness. As I descended the subway stairs, I noticed a man standing still amidst the moving crowd. His eyes met mine, and a chill ran down my spine. He seemed familiar, like I had seen him in a dream. I boarded the train, trying to avoid thinking about the stranger. The ride home felt endless, and I couldn't shake the sense that something was very wrong. When I finally reached my apartment, I locked the door behind me and leaned against it, taking deep breaths. That night, I had trouble sleeping. My dreams were fragmented, filled with echoes of the day's events. I woke up several times, drenched in sweat, convinced that someone had been in my room. But each time, the room was empty and the door was still locked. The next morning, I woke to my alarm blaring at 6:30 a.m. I groaned, reaching to turn it off. As I went through my morning routine, a horrifying realization dawned on me. Everything was exactly the same as the day before. The same hurried breakfast, the same faces on the walk to the subway, the same feeling of déjà vu that grew stronger with each passing hour. I tried to break the pattern. I took a different route to work, wore a different outfit, skipped my usual coffee. But nothing changed. The conversations, the tasks, even the mistakes, all of it played out exactly as it had the day before. By the third day, I was desperate. I confided in Sarah, telling her everything. Her reaction was the same as before, the same words, the same laugh. I felt like I was losing my mind. That night, I stayed awake, determined to break the cycle. I watched the clock, counting down the minutes to midnight. When the clock struck 12, a wave of dizziness washed over me, and I blacked out. I woke to my alarm blaring at 6:30 a.m. The terror was immediate. I was trapped in a never-ending loop, forced to relive the same day over and over. No matter what I did, I couldn't break free. I watched my life play out like a pre-recorded script, powerless to change a single detail. Each day, the feeling of déjà vu intensified, crushing me under its weight. The people around me became like actors in a twisted play, their lines and actions predetermined. The sense of dread grew unbearable, a constant gnawing presence. I don't know how long I've been trapped here. Days, months, years. Time has lost all meaning. All I know is that each day I wake up to the same blaring alarm, the same unremarkable Tuesday, with no escape in sight. And as I sit here, writing this, I wonder if anyone will ever find this note. If anyone will ever know the horror of being trapped in a never-ending loop, living the same day over and over, with no hope of escape. If you're reading this, beware the feeling of déjà vu. It might just be the beginning of your own nightmare.